Welcome to Coding Commanders. I'm Commander Candy, and today I'm going to explain the difference between front end and back end development. We are going to talk about basically the front end and the back end languages I'll be using in my intro to web development tutorials and how they interact together, what the differences between front and back end, basic concepts like that you should grasp before you start building applications. So let's get started. Back end versus front end. Okay. So we have our back end languages, which are server side languages. That means the code's being executed on the server. If you're not sure what a server is, I touch on it in my Intro to LAMP video, which I will link in the description. So it's getting executed on the server. That's also where like our databases, stuff like that, high security going on over here. The code is away from the user's computer. It's not going to be executed on the user's computer. It's executed on the server. In contrast, front-end languages are client-side. The code executes right on the user's computer. Some things are better to do in the back end. Some things are better to do in the front end. I personally prefer it in the back end. There is a lot of logic that you can do in the front end or the back end. In my Coding Commanders Intro to Web Development course, the languages we are going to use are as follows. On the back end, we're going to use MySQL for our database, and PHP is a server-side language that's going to speak to our database. On the front end, we're going to use HTML to display things to the user. We are going to use CSS to format our HTML, and then we are going to use JavaScript as our client-side language. So we have our MySQL database all the way in the back, then PHP, where we can write our logic and talk to our database. Then on the front side, we have our text, our images, things like that displayed in our HTML, our CSS formatting that HTML, and our JavaScript is our programming language that can interact with the HTML and CSS to write our front end code. Anytime you call PHP, anytime you execute PHP code, it's going to do a page refresh. Want certain things to be done. There's not going to be time for it. There's things that you want to instantaneously interact with the user. Whereas in the back end, that's the back end language. PHP is what you're going to use to pull information out of your database. The code is executed on the server. So anything with the database, you're going to have to, use some PHP. If your front end isn't going to have access, and you wouldn't want that. You wouldn't want your database to be on the user's computer, right? Because that's your data. There's two ways that can go, right? You have information stored, your information that you inputted that you're storing in there, and then there's also user input. So say you're a bank and you have people's account information and their balances and all that in the database. That's where hackers come in, cybersecurity, all that. You want to make sure that's secure. Now imagine if the code that did that was being executed on the client side. That would be ridiculous, right? I mean, you wouldn't do that. So if something needs to be hidden and secure, you're definitely going to want it in the back end. If something needs to be instantaneously interacting with the user, you're definitely going to want to do that in front end. So think about it, and maybe pause the video, think about it, and I'll come back and I'll give you some examples. You guys have to excuse me. I'm not looking as well put together as I usually like to. There is a hurricane that's pretty strong that might be hitting South Florida. I live there on an island, so I'm going to be evacuating tonight. But I'm trying to get you guys a video out first. So let's go over some things that you might want to code on the front end and some things you might want to code on the back end. I'm kind of in a hurry. I Googled digital whiteboard. I got this site, awwapp.com. I'm not that great a whiteboard artist. The first thing I poorly wrote on my list is timer. Okay, if say a game, like I made my son this quiz game and it had a timer, and every level you had less and less time to answer the questions correctly. The timer I wrote in JavaScript on the front end. A timer, you want that to be up to the second, right? It's counting down. Like mine started 60 seconds and went down. You want it to be accurate, sometimes to maybe even a millisecond. So you don't want to do a refresh every time the ticker ticks. You don't imagine if the page had to refresh just for it to go 1 second. It would take longer than a second. Something you might want to do on the back end. Login page. So the login page here, you want to do the back end because generally speaking, that requires a username and password. So if the user enters in a username and password, then you're going to have to probably go to the database, see if it matches, retrieve this person's information, and nobody's going to want their information on the front end where the other users have access to it. Somebody's personal information needs to be secure in a database. On my website where there's syntax and then a description. In the description, if you highlight over the code or keyword written in bold, it highlights the code it's talking about on the top. That's something that you would want to do on the front end because I want it to instantaneously interact with you. You, the user on my website, when you do mouse hover, I want my code to run. So I do that on the front end. Okay, what's something else we might do in the back end? High score list, okay? Say you make a web browser game and you have a high score list. What you're going to do is when somebody completes the game, you're going to want to take that person, whatever the name they typed in is, and their score and put it in the database and then have some code where on the high score list, it's going to display the 10 people with the highest score. Anything where you got to capture information, save it, and then do something with it, you're probably going to want to do in the back end. In order to further explain this relationship, I made a cute little PowerPoint animation based off of an analogy I'm going to use where I'm comparing our web application to a store. So in the front of the store, we have our shelves. That's our HTML divs and things like that. Those are our shelves where we're displaying our content, paragraphs, images, video, whatever. We're displaying it on our display shelves. The CSS is kind of like the person who designed those shelves. Our CSS is going to design and format it, decide their size, their shape, their color, things like that, so we can display our desired result to the client. Way in the back, we have our database. We're going to be using MySQL. That's kind of like a warehouse at a store. In a warehouse, they're going to store all the products and merchandise that eventually will probably have to make its way to our HTML/CSS shelves. Alligator Store Manager Woman PHP comes to save the day. She is able to communicate with the warehouse workers in order to get our information that's stored in the database, similar to how a warehouse stores products. And then when she has that, she could do calculations, manipulations, write the logic, the code that's going to actually do something with the data. And although PHP is able to go and pull something out of the database and display it in an HTML div, it doesn't know how to talk with the HTML and CSS. Alligator Woman PHP is not the best with customers, so she had to hire JavaScript to work in the front of the house. Now, JavaScript can also go on the cash register. She can also do calculations, manipulations, write logic. She cannot communicate with the warehouse workers, but she can communicate with HTML and CSS. Okay, guys, thank you for joining me again. Sorry if I look a little rough today. There's a lot going on. I mentioned I am about to evacuate because I live on an island and there's a strong hurricane that might be coming. Hopefully it doesn't hit, but either way, I have to leave my home. You know, mandatory evacuation. They close the bridges and stuff. You don't want to be on an island during like a big, strong hurricane. Or any hurricane, even a little one. So if you'd like to donate, the link to my list of donor rewards is there. Yes, I will reward you for helping support my cause to provide quality, free computer programming education to people of all socioeconomic backgrounds as well as all educational backgrounds. You don't need a math background. You don't need computer science or computer programming experience to follow my tutorials. You don't need anybody. You just need the will to learn. So if you'd like to support that cause and my hurricane evacuation relief fund, think about donating. If you have any questions about this, please comment below. Also, if you thought of any examples, which I'm sure you did, comment below. Let me know what your examples are for the front end and the back end. If you're unsure, as long as I have access to electricity, I will reply, let you know how you're doing. If not, you'll have to wait till I get my power back on. But also maybe there's somebody else who it might help them to see more examples written out. So give your example, front end, back end, comment below. Wish me luck. Hopefully no hurricane hits, but I still gotta evacuate just in case. I'll be prettier next video. So that's it for today. Until next time, happy coding.